No to dobra. Does it work? Okay, and we're live. So, good evening, everybody. It's very nice to have you here, and I understand that we are all very excited about the recent development in Argentina, the first libertarian president ever. And this will be the main focus of our chat today. I am Mikołaj Pisarski. I am president of the Mises Institute of Economic Education based in Wrocław, Poland. And my guest for today is Federico Fernàndez, president of Fundacion Bases International, Argentinian himself, one of the leaders of the Austrian and libertarian movement in Argentina, and organizer of one of the, or maybe even the largest, by count of attendees at least, Austrian economic conferences in the world that happens every 2 years in Rosario in Argentina. Hello, Federico.
Hello, Mikołaj. Thank you to everybody at the Mises Institute Poland. It's a pleasure to be talking to you tonight and about this magnificent topic.
It's very nice to have you here, but before we proceed, let me give a quick overview of our chat for today, because I want to give floor to Federico to answer all the questions coming from you, our audience. So I will ask only several questions. I think it should not take longer than 30-45 minutes, and then the floor will be open to you. So post your questions on our YouTube chat, and I will read them out loud later in the interview. And before we proceed to Milei, Federico, I believe that it's important for us to set up a baseline to which we will compare his plans and eventual results of his reform, because even from our perspective here in Poland, in Eastern Europe, in a post-communist country, I believe it's very hard to understand how dire really the situation is in Argentina. And Milei himself said already in one of the interviews that he will also begin his inauguration speech from giving such overview. So if you could briefly tell us what's the situation after this almost 80 years of Peronist left-wing governments.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Mikołaj, you're asking me a very difficult task, particularly because you said briefly, and I just about this we could be talking for 48 hours at least, 72 hours easily, and probably we wouldn't even deal with all the problems that Argentina has. It's been, as you said, it's been already several decades of decadence, of going down, of a slippery slope with the economy. And just, to give a telling anecdote of how the situation is. But I won't be just in this. I'll go back in time now. Later, after this, I'll go to what's going on now, because really, if not, it will be very sad, and we'll be talking about things that happened in the 1950s, and it really. But when Juan Domingo Perón arrived to power in 1946, one of the first things he did was to visit the central bank in Argentina, and he even took a picture there. He said, "There's so much gold that you cannot even walk through the hallways," and that was true. Well, he dealt with that problem. There is no more gold. In fact, the reserves, the net reserves of the Central Bank of Argentina currently are minus $10 billion. That's the situation. So from being, overflown with gold to negative net reserves in the central bank, which tells you the state of our currency. Just to give you certain, let's say, points and things of what's going on now and the kind of situation, because Milei is going to face a difficult environment in many ways. Argentina is a difficult country. The international, let's say, establishment is not welcoming Milei. I mean, there are, of course, exceptions. And, I think in time, the perception about him will definitely change. There are comparisons that, I think they are completely unfair and unwarranted with other leaders. But, if you Google Milei right now, far right, extremists, all these things that I don't think, particularly
we will talk about that in a minute, but I really want us to set a baseline from which we will compare the situation. So if you could share some macroeconomic data, for example, to show us the scale of the challenge that Milei will have to tackle.
Yeah, happily. No, exactly. Where I was going to that in the sense that you have all this difficult environment, let's say the perception, and he's going to have to deal with a country that it's literally in a coma. Argentina is about to die if things continue as they are now. As I said, our central bank is broke, minus $10.5 billion of net reserves. There's another issue regarding, Argentina has a brutal system of
Federico,
currency.
if I might cut in for a moment, someone says that there is the audio problem on your side. If you could maybe tone down your microphone a bit.
Okay, let's see. Let's do the following. Let's see if I remove this and I just... How is it now? Can you hear me?
I think it's better now.
Okay, it was Apple.
already plotting against the libertarian revolution.
Exactly. Yeah.
So back to economic situation.
Yeah. Again, central bank broke. Argentina has in this moment there are 25 different exchange rates regarding the dollar, basically, because there's a brutal financial mismanagement and controls and over-regulations and restrictions, of course. So we have an official value of the US dollar, which currently is something like 360 pesos per dollar, but you cannot buy any dollars at that point, at that price. It's like, if I tell you, Mikołaj, would you like a hot dog? Yes, $1. But when I sell it to you, it's without the sausage. If you want it with the sausage, we have to think of a different price. And it's something like that. The real value of the dollar is over 1,000 pesos per dollar, while the official value is 300 something. So that creates a mess, particularly for people who import. And there's another bomb being, ticking there, which is the private debt that importers from Argentina have with their providers. And, I don't know how the hell they're going to pay, which is currently at 22 billion. And the government, they cannot go through the unofficial, let's say, channels.
22 billion US dollars private debt.
Exactly.
Private debt. Okay,
and they have to go through the official channels, and the government is not selling them the dollars. So this debt is mounting up, and this is also a brutal thing that it's happening there, and it's going to be a major issue.
But
Another thing,
the monetary situation and the dollarization problem will reach that. But what about the public services, the hospitals, the education?
yeah, well, I mean, Argentina is a country that has all the public services on paper, you could say. If you say, is there a free access to health in Argentina? Yes, on paper. Don't get sick, because if you get sick, you're going to face a completely different story, which is that hospitals don't have like the very basic, things that they need to take care of their patients. Doctors are brutally overworked. Their buildings are literally falling apart. The same with schools. We were discussing a few days ago. In Argentina, if I remember correctly, only 10% of children graduate high school at the normal rate, which is appalling.
Yeah,
schools.
That's like third country rate.
Yeah. Schools, Mikołaj, in many ways are deposits for children. And the main need that they fulfill is feeding people. It's not feeding their minds, just literally feeding, because their families cannot feed them. That's also, you see how many institutions have completely switched and changed their original objective into just be some sort of emergency exit for the brutal social situation that we have now. I mean, another institution that does a lot socially, and well, if you ask me, unfortunately has forgotten of some of its other part, and its other duties, is the Catholic Church. Without the Catholic Church and institutions like Caritas, Argentina would be probably in a humanitarian crisis by now. So that is definitely appalling. Another thing, technically, for the last 12 years, Argentina has had stagflation. It's basically, there has been no economic growth. The only thing that has grown is inflation. And in the last 3-4 months, inflation has skyrocketed, creating more poor people than in the last, than really in a long time. In the last 12 months, we have 1.2 million more poor people, and 43.5% nowadays of people in Argentina are poor. And from that 43.5% of the population, more than 10% are what you could call destitute, are people who are in extreme poverty, people who really have serious issues in order to eat. That's the situation. 1 every 2 children is poor in current Argentina. And with this I finish, because I think it's extremely sad.
1 every 2 child are living in poverty in Argentina, and we have the situation after 80 years of socialist statist government, which had the well-being of these people on their standards. So I think we know from which we will have to start, and we have this basically country that falls apart tragically, and then enters Milei. So where did he come from, and who is he? Because to us it looks like he happened out of the blue.
Yeah, the last pure, because it has to do with dollarization. Inflation in the last 12 months has been 142%. So that is the scenario. Where does Milei come? That's a very good question, and I can tell you, I can give you not a proper answer. I know Javier personally since 2016, and I mean the Austrian economics community, the classical liberal community has been growing steadily, and now, I mean, you saw what happened last Sunday. But at one point, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we more or less knew we knew each other, you know. And Javier appeared a little bit out of nowhere. For what I know, I have talked to some friends, and you know, for what I even talked to Javier, and for what I could reconstruct, Javier is a trained economist. He spent most of his life a little bit in academia and a little bit in the private sector, working for big corporations. You know, so he has a very solid background. He's a man that has always been in the private sector, in academia.
So did
he
attend your events, or did the two of you?
Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you a few things about that, because I have certain things I want to tell you that really explain why what happened last Sunday happened. He was always very much free market oriented, but he was of a neoclassical, let's say, structure, which is the kind of education in general you received when you're a trained economist. I mean, there are, of course, and more, you know, beautiful islands and programs and places like that, you know, that teach you particularly Austrian economics. But in general, if you're a trained economist, you know, you're the kind of upbringing you get is neoclassical. But he was always pro free market. And then it was a combination of, this was around 2012, 2013, to put a time. There was a combination of certain individuals who influenced him, economics in one lesson. That book really made a difference in his life. Some Ayn Rand readings as well. And in that we are extremely blessed in Argentina, and this also relates to a lot of the work that you do at the Mises Institute in Poland. We have a lot of the books of the Austrians, particularly Hayek, Mises, etc., translated into our own language, and they are available. I mean, Javier speaks English, but you know, they are available. You know, you can go somewhere and buy them, or you can buy them online. But you know, they are there. And Javier, at one point, and this apparently happened, went to a library to a bookshop. I mistook the word in Spanish. To a bookshop and he literally bought like everything that was Austrian, and from Unión Editorial, by the way, that's an amazing job. And really, I mean, this shows you this story, and this is a very, you know, broad stroke, you know, rough story. Don't take it as I'm sure there were a lot of processes that have to do with his life, with other things that I don't know, but definitely these readings were a major influence in his life, you know, definitely, and now in the life of at least 45 million Argentinians. And this shows you the power, and this is why really, and everybody who's watching this and, you know, wants perhaps a Milei in Poland, in Central Europe, should donate to the Mises Institute Poland, because the fantastic work that you are doing, getting this, you know, getting these works into the Polish language is definitely something that we should all applaud, and we should all celebrate, and we should all support, especially.
Thank you so much, Federico. So maybe the future Polish Milei is already here listening, maybe even among our crowd.
Could be, you know, given the hair, it could be you, Mikołaj.
No, I'm staying far away from politics, but you told something very interesting. Because you've said that this transition, one could say, from classical liberal position to more Austrian or libertarian began 10 years ago. So it's not just a pose for Milei, right? It's not a creation made up for election. It was a true, deep, meaningful intellectual change. Am I getting this right?
No, totally. Javier spoke, for instance, in our Austrian Economic Conference, he spoke twice, and in 2016. Let me tell you a few anecdotes about. He came, you know, to Rosario with us. He came several times, but I want to mention 2016, 17, and 18 because it really shows the rocket, you know, taking off and going to Mars, you know. 2016, he was already becoming very like media, a usual media participant, talking at talk shows, being invited, with his, crazy hair, and, he's quite in your face, so he was somebody who didn't go unnoticed. And in 2016, I remember when he came to talk to our conference, you could see already, that there was this feeling this guy could be a rock star. Some guy, many people were taking selfies with him. 2017, he came again to Rosario. That day, he knew capitalist exploitation. And this I want to tell because, in capitalist exploitation is a joke, of course, but I want to tell because this is, Javier has a lot of extremely good qualities. And one of them is that he's a very good person, an extremely generous person. In 2017, and by the way, it's not that we were friends forever and he knew us for a very long time. No, it's been a couple of years that we've been in touch, but he has always been very, very like militant in the sense, hey, these ideas we need to promote, we need to do as much as we can. We brought him to Rosario. Rosario is approximately 300 something kilometers from Buenos Aires. It's more or less 4 hour, ride by car, 3.5, 4 hours. It's a good road, but it takes time really. He came in the same day. He came and went back to Buenos Aires. In that day, he gave 3 talks. We made him talk at lunch for a group of donors and close people of Fundación Internacional Bases. Then he stayed with us for a couple of hours in the center of Rosario. Then he gave a magnificent talk in which that I couldn't believe the age average of the attendees. By the way, for that talk, we have to change rooms 3 times, venues 3 times, because we needed something bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And, people started, and again, I couldn't believe it because I used to know everybody who more or less attended to our events. And it was an explosion of guys who were literally 15, 16, and I couldn't believe it. And guys, you could see very young university students, 250, 300 people. He took like 1 million selfies, signed 1 million books. He stayed until we wanted him to go because we were taking him to the 3rd and final event. But he stayed until the very last moment, taking pictures with everybody, signing whatever they wanted to sign. And then we took him to a final event, which was like an informal dinner, like a standing dinner, and with some young people related to Fundacion Bases that we wanted him wanted them to have that opportunity to spend time with him. And then we finished this, he said goodbye to everybody again, took the last selfies, got into a car, and went back to Buenos Aires. All in the same day. 8 hours traveling in total because it's 4 plus 4. For this, of course, he didn't charge a cent. He never asked. And he did all this because in one day, and he made this effort. But in 2017, you could already see that there was something magical going on. And in 2018, this was amazing for us. He came again to our Austrian conference. It was a major success. The conference went great, but the conference is a big event. We have, for instance,
how many people attend on average?
No, the conference was huge. We have, during the 3 days, we have probably 600 people, 700 people, and every day we had 400. It was very big. And for such a big event, you need certain logistical things. For instance, we hire people who for the coffee breaks, for lunches, for things like that. And you could see, but Austrian economics up to that point was not like a massive talking point. It really is like it was not. And our conference is an academic conference. When Javier spoke, firstly, like a lot of people started to come up that we had no idea who they were. But the people which were young people, the young people who were working with the coffee break, the company that served the coffee break and things like that, they came and asked us, can we go listen to him? And at that point, I said, it's not that I said this guy's going to be president, but you could really see that there was something going on because he broke that barrier. He was no longer an academic. He was something else. And his message was permeating in places that we have never been able to, and I include myself, we have never been able to reach that level of all social classes, every background, every not the typical academic thing. And that day, I remember 2018. I said, we're going somewhere. Classical liberalism, really. This is we are in a zone that we've never been. We reach somewhere else. And for that, of course, this is not the work of one person, even if we think of Javier, who is somebody who is extremely positive for the movement and has done a lot. But Javier is the catalyzer of this, for sure.
That's a wonderful testament to the character of the person, and I think we've managed to get a very intimate portrayal of who Javier really is, because the media are constantly smearing him and trying to paint him like a very vile person. But you said something interesting, because you said that he had this power to captivate people. And this enthusiasm is visible clearly in every public appearance that he has. So if you could tell more about that, because there is this long time ongoing debate within the libertarian movement that we lack good communicators, because our ideas are as sound as they get. It's the communication that's the problem. So would you attribute this to that? Or is there some other factor that managed, allowed Milei to be catapulted to this popularity?
I would say, no, I wouldn't. I think, let's say, I think our ideas have the most explanatory power. I think also they are a difficult sell. We really, and I think we have wonderful communicators in many ways. So I wouldn't go, let's say, I don't want to bash anybody in particular, because really I mean it, I think we have very good communicators. In the case of Javier, I think, and this, let's say, you are yourself and you know what surrounds you, let's say, like Ortega. This is a rough translation of what Ortega said, said. And in that regard, this is what played in the favor of Javier. Argentina is a country that has been in a slippery slope for a very long time. And now we have not only that, and that's palpable now, Argentina is going to hell, we discussed a little bit about the figures. Just another figure, just to give you an idea, in Argentina, a family group of 4 people is considered middle class if they make altogether a little bit over $400.
$400. But $100 per person in a household.
No, but not even per person, the whole group. Yes, exactly. Yeah, so really, it's so that is undeniable. And now we have, if there was any question, we have internet, we have cell phones, we have, so now you can see how, for instance, Polish people live. You can see how people live in other countries. You can easily see that, you cannot fool everybody all the time. That's what Peronism has lost, by the way. You cannot have everybody fooled. And in that, let's say, that created a very, that created an environment, and you add to that the power of social media. These elections in Argentina have shown Javier basically most of the time had all the establishment media, all the traditional media against him, brutally against him. At the point that he went to interviews and they didn't allow him to speak, they interrupted him all the time. It's 1 against 5, literally. It's like that was his campaigning, in media, being bashed all the time, being asked horrible questions, unfair questions, being labeled as things that he's not, etc., etc. But he has social media. and he's a force of nature there. So it was the right kind of environment. Clearly, he's a master communicator. Clearly, that's old ladies like him. Everybody, young people love him, but old ladies, everybody, that he covers, all ages, all. But all these things combined, the power of social media, the decadence of Argentina, that you can now compare, people being fed up. And I think the final, let's say, the cherry on top, the final drop that made the glass completely spill out was the handle of the pandemic by the government. Because, if there was, I don't think Argentina needed it, but if there was one final reason in which you should think, hey, maybe the state in Argentina is completely out of control, was the handling of the pandemic. And with this, I'll just finish. Let me finish with an anecdote, but it's very telling. I will never forget watching live television from Argentina and a lady, I don't know, like a 35-year-old lady walking in the sidewalk, being chased by two policemen, and this was caught by TV live. And the woman, this poor woman, telling the policeman, "The Constitution allows me to walk freely." And the policeman replies, "Constitution? Which Constitution? We are in a pandemic." Wow. That was the that was the side, guys, let's say, of the handling of the pandemic.
So again, an interesting bit. So he was very vocal about the pandemic. So if you could very briefly tell us his position on lockdowns and on the vaccines, because I believe these were the two most divisive issues in every society across the world during COVID.
I would be honest, on the vaccines, I don't remember what he said. He's definitely not an anti-vaxxer or anything like that, and I think that's very important because, how this, you can have certain hesitations about the COVID vaccines. That's fantastic. But, if you are starting to not wanting to vaccinate children about things that we have eradicated, that's a different story. About the lockdowns from, literally from almost the very beginning, he was against, and he was extremely vocal about.
Wonderful.
And in 2021 he ran for a member of parliament, and in part, even though already the country was quasi open or almost open, that was, I think people remember that he was one of the very few there, because basically politicians who were in power were totally in favor of the lockdowns, and politicians who were in the opposition were total cowards, with few exceptions, and one of them was Javier.
So this elections, it was 2 years ago, right? When he was elected for the first time, he began serving his term, and then it was clear that he is becoming a black horse, rough translation of a Polish saying, for the upcoming presidential elections. And to keep it brief and leave enough time for the questions, if you could summarize for us the platform on which he ran. What were the main points that he wanted to achieve? Because we know about dollarization, we hear it in every article, but it's not just that, right? There are many issues that he wanted to tackle.
Okay, I mean, as I explained, there are a million things to do in Argentina, but let's start from the beginning. One thing that Javier has said, I think he has been extremely blunt about everything he wants to say, starting with closing the central bank. But one thing that he says that, of course, you, me, everybody who's watching this, probably we understand, but the media never picked up, and probably they don't understand. He says that he's running because he doesn't want the power for himself. He wants to give the power back to the people. And that's the very baseline. If you want to understand what's at the base, what's the cornerstone of what Javier wants to achieve at his during his presidency, is giving the power back to the people. This beast that we have created in our state, to tame it, put it down, and have something completely different animal after his presidency. So this is very important. He has said this over and over again. they are media in general, both local in Argentina and in the rest of the world, are not understanding that Javier is a classical liberal, a libertarian, but really they don't understand that. And so they miss the central point, which in a way is good.
Far-right, alt-right, right-wing extremist, so...
Exactly. Yeah, far right. I mean, I don't want the power to, which fascist, says, I want to give you the power. I don't want to do, my idea is not to do anything. And well, very quickly, give power back to the people. Huge program of deregulation, privatization of currently publicly run companies, lower taxes, tax simplification. By the way, a little bit of propaganda of us in Fundacion Bases is currently working. This project is under the wing of Marianela Mendoza, who is a very gifted lawyer, and she knows a lot about economics. And by the way, we'll be presenting this proposal in a couple of hours in Argentina. We are working on flat tax for Argentina, and we definitely want to, let's say, talk to people in Javier's circles about this. They have an idea of tax simplification, and Argentina has close to 200 taxes. As you can imagine, some of these taxes probably cost more than what they get in revenue because they are so insane. So tax simplification and lowering taxes, ending the central bank, free trade. Argentina may or may not, I don't know, but may leave Mercosur. Mercosur has become... in certain ways, unfortunately, shackles, an anti-trade group led by Brazil, vouchers for education, and I am sure an idea also to introduce as much freedom in the curricula, in how schools teach the same at universities. So it's a very ambitious program, as you can see.
And would you say, is this a real program? Are these reforms really thought down? And who are the people who will be working behind? Because Milei is just one person, right? Or is it just a bunch of very nice sounding libertarian slogans that will have to be worked out by somebody after he takes the office?
Well, this in a way is going to be challenging for him because, you need a lot of people in order to run a country. He comes from a new formation, a very anti-traditional politics formation as well. But I know many people who are accompanying him. I know the people that they are, let's say, trying to gather for the next administration, and I'm sure he'll be accompanied by people capable and with the right mindset and, let's say, a spirit in order to try to make these transformations reality. But definitely that's going to be a challenge. I think he's going to overcome this challenge.
Because one thing that seems to be really well thought out is the Dollarization program, right? There is a pretty famous book written by two Austrian economists, Emilio Ocampo and Nicolas Kachanowski, and Milei endorsed their propositions. So if you could briefly tell us the most important points about that, the impact that will have on Argentina, and maybe if there is a role in the future either government or other institution for these two gentlemen who...
Well, Emilio Ocampo in particular, I know Nicolas, by the way, who is a magnificent economist now living in the US, and he's been part of our Austrian conference in many occasions. He comes from a very illustrious family, you could say, because his father was Juan Carlos Kachanowski, who unfortunately passed away some years ago, but to my understanding, he's probably the brightest Spanish-speaking Austrian economist that we've ever had, and we also Nicolas' brother Ivan is also a very gifted Austrian economist who is now in charge. He's leading SEADE, which is an education organization, a university. So the Kachanowskis are very, very interesting people. Emilio Ocampo also has a very interesting background. He's a very brilliant man. And there are rumors, this is not official yet, that Emilio Ocampo will be the president of the central bank. hopefully the last one.
Austrian economist at the head of central bank.
Yeah. Hopefully, hopefully he will be the one changing the building into the Museum of Inflation, and we'll see. That would be lovely. But anyway, I am not an economist, and by the way, Nicolas, for instance, has written a lot. You can go, for instance, to the website of AIER. There are a lot of very good explanations. Check the book. Nicolas writes in English most of his things. So I would leave it, the technical aspects, I would leave them to explain, because probably I will disfigure them a little bit. But just to give you an idea, this is for what I've been talking to people close to Milei, for what I know, what Javier thinks, and what I see. Dollarization is the following. Let's say it's the following steps. The first thing regarding dollarization is the recognition that the Argentinian state, and particularly Argentinian politicians, cannot issue currency. They have destroyed. The current iteration of the Argentinian peso is the last they are destroying, but they have destroyed several in the past. Argentina has had hyperinflation in '89 and 1990, and before that, Argentina has had. It's one of the highest inflation countries in the world. We have had six monetary signs in our history. So, this is the recognition, not so much about the value of the dollar, but of the total lack of value of the politician-issued national currency. So that's why, and people, the dollar, the US dollar has been the safe haven for Argentinians forever. Important, if you're buying a house, you buy it in dollars. Nobody will sell something in pesos, and, if you want to save some money, you buy dollars. That's what always happens. When there are difficulties in the horizon, people buy dollars. It's always like that. Is the haven, and this has been decided by the people. But I think dollarization will be a step into abolishing legal tender and going through a very interesting currency competition scenario. Because I think dollarization will be the base, and I think it's a necessary step. But then I think the policy hopefully will go even further into abolishing legal tender, and just allowing people to do contracts in whichever currency they want. This opens the door, of course, to Bitcoin, not only to nationally issued currencies. Javier, by the way, is quite sympathetic towards Bitcoin. So hopefully this will be. I think these are the logical steps, and I understand why dollarization is the first step, and I fully support it, by the way.
This sounds amazing, and we have 2 minutes before I wanted to proceed to the question. So tell me, because there's one accusation that repeats over and over and over again in every media smear. Javier Milei is the populist. Is he? Because from what I've heard, most of the reforms that he is proposing are tough ones. They will be extremely painful, so it doesn't sound like a typical populist to me. And how does Argentinian society react to it?
Yes, it's very funny. I was reading yesterday on Twitter. Then I went to the link. Somebody, some of these so-called national conservatives, who should be labeled national something else, but doesn't matter. He was claiming exactly. He was, it's very interesting. This guy was saying, hey, this is not one of us, this Milei is not one of us. He's for free trade. And the other thing that completely separates Milei from populism, particularly in Latin America. Let's say when I think of populism, I think of Latin American populism, because, by the way, in that regard, we are like the OGs of populism. Really, if you want to know about populism, come talk to us. And what does Milei have to do with somebody like Maduro or Chavez or all these people? Nothing. His campaign has been saying, hey, I want to cut this, privatize that. I want to. I mean, he's not promising honey and the land of milk and honey, and you'll have to work 2 hours per day, and then everything will be granted to you. He's having a clear campaign that I'm going to give the power back to you. I'm going to move the state as far from you as I can, and it's going to be, and we're going to have to compete with the rest of the world. So no, he's not the populist. The accusation in part, I think, has to do with two issues. Firstly, sometimes his ways are very much like in your face. He can be, he's way more calm. Definitely, he has changed a lot. In the last couple of years, not in the last couple of weeks. But now with internet, everything is there forever. So you want to see, you Google Milei insulting, and you can find wherever a lot of videos of him saying not the nicest words. He has changed that, but he had these ways. And the other issue that maybe makes some people, I think, totally mistakenly think he's some sort of populist, is that he has a direct contact with the citizenry, but this is because of how communication has totally changed. It's because today media, traditional media, is watched by a very small segment of the population, and people only, let's say, are informed. We even, by the way, we did an opinion. We did an opinion poll in Chile about digitalization, and we asked how people get information, and I think it was 75% social media. That's so. Javier has, and indeed, well, this is Chile, but I'm sure it's everywhere. Everywhere is the same. In any case, Javier has this direct contact with people, not because he's a fascist that wants to, go over the traditional channels of communication and of media. It's that media, as we knew it, at least myself, because I'm a certain age, that I knew what life was before internet, etc., has totally dissolved. But this is not the work of Javier, or the work of any. It's what it was just happened. So that's the case, and mounted on those two misunderstandings is the complete disfiguration of Javier as a far right, whatever.
Thank you for this. So we have gotten a very nice insight into Javier Milei from a person who knows him personally, who with him together built this Austro-libertarian movement in Argentina. Thank you for that, Federico. And now I will move to the questions that I got from the audience. I see quite some of them on our chat, but first I would like to start with one coming from the old Twitter, now X, from our friend from Paraguay, who hides under the nickname Realtech, and he makes a prediction. And he was very curious whether you agree or whether you will add something or point out some mistakes in his reasoning, because he's also on the ground monitoring closely the events in Argentina. So basically what he says, let me read it out loud. Milei and Macri already announced that the next 6 months will be a very tough time. Argentina will have, as he calls it, turbocharged Balcerowicz-style transformation. The Realtech calls it this way. Massive price increases will affect public transport, fuel, energy, food, and public services. It may translate into a demand-side shocks, and this in turn might lead to increase in, and correct me, Federico, if I read it correct in Spanish, saqueos?
Yeah. He means that people go in...
mass looting of shops and markets. Yeah. And this might affect one of the core Milei promises, increase of public safety. All in all, this might be few toughest months in the recent history of Argentina, and only after this time she might emerge economically stronger, unless there will be a coup. So, first part about this troubles of the transition, and then we know it from history whether Milei new government is threatened by a potential coup or some other hijacking of power by the army or
Yeah, that's a, I, you know, that's it. Let's say what our friend from Paraguay, it's a very, let's say, it's a very bright analysis. It's a possible future, you know. It's like Avengers, you know. It's a possible future. I don't think that is what's going to happen. Argentina has, unfortunately, Argentina has a problem, which is that administrations that are not run by the Peronist party tend to be brutally destabilized by the Peronist party. And that always happens. But there are many things that play in the favor of Javier. One of them is that he has told the truth, and he continues to tell the truth. And as we were mentioning at the beginning of our conversation, his accession to power speech is going to be basically describing the kind. I'm not going to say making the autopsy, because Argentina is not a corpse yet, but you under almost the autopsy of what he's going to have to deal with. And he has told the truth from the beginning, because I said it's not that he's been promising vote me and everything will be milk and honey and we'll all live in happy forever after. So I think and that a candidate like Javier actually won, also tells you about what the society is, where the society is right now. He has a major public support. Peronism has completely lost face once again, because they are living now literally in shambles, in shame. The current president is like missing, literally. I mean, the current president is missing. The vice president, who is Cristina Kirchner, who maybe you heard about, who nationalized, by the way, the public pensions some time ago. She's also missing in action. So there is a lot of things that play into the idea that there will be social tolerance for like the horribly tasting medicine that you want the doctor to give you, because you're very bad, and that you have to have this bad this bad segment of time in order to reach a better state in some time. So, but definitely, like I forgot the handle of Twitter, the name of our friend in Paraguay, but Realtech. Milei will have to be extremely careful, and everybody who surrounds him, his administration will have to be extremely careful. Macri also was heavily destabilized during his 4-year tenure, and well, he could finish his government, which was, I mean, for Argentinian standards, was a major achievement. So definitely this is a threat, but I hope that is not going to happen. People will endure.
Thank you, Federico. So, first question from our chat, Tomasz Malinowski. Does Fundacion Bases plan to cooperate with Milei as economic policy advisors or in any other capacity?
We are a non-partisan organization. We definitely, it's obvious where our heart is. We are classical liberals, and we support, and we have always, let's say, been in good relationship with all the spectrum of classical liberal NGOs, and we have always been very sympathetic towards everybody who wants to run, for any candidacy, and is doing it from a classical liberal perspective. But we are, and this has to do with, let's say, with our, how do you say, how the organization is structured. We are a legal foundation, let's say, legally established, and we cannot be part of politics. definitely, I mean, but this is what we have always done when we do things related to public policy. All that we do is open source. You know, it's not that we're doing something for Mikołaj, who is the current mayor of Wrocław. We do it, and you know, if the mayor in Wrocław or the mayor of Kraków wants to pick it up and wants to do the reform that we are advocating, that's fine, but not in an official way, because we cannot.
So if Milei would come to you and offer you a position, for example, of the Minister of Finance, would you accept or decline?
This is like Misesa. I would quit immediately. I don't think it would be good for Argentina that I'm the Minister of Finance.
Very.
There are people. We named a few here that are more capable to do that.
That's a very humble and very libertarian answer in the spirit. And another question from our chat, Jack Vane 1. And this, if you could expand a bit on the whole structure of the parliament, what Milei can do without majority in Argentinian parliament. And if you could briefly tell us about the forces in this parliament, who supports him, who will be the opposition.
The scenario in the parliament is not ideal, but it's not catastrophic either. Argentina has a lower chamber and the Senate, let's say like the House and the Senate, like the US. And Argentina, in that regard, Argentina is not like Poland or, I don't know, the United Kingdom or Spain, that are these parliamentarian regimes mostly. Argentina is a presidential system with similar to the US in our structure. You know, probably only in that we're similar to the US. We have the two chambers. In the lower chamber, I mean, Javier's party is a new party. And, you know, we have also, it's not that all the seats are in play in every election. The lower chamber renews by halves, and the Senate by thirds, which has positive and negative connotations. In a way, it's a way to limit power. I think it's not a necessarily bad idea, but it doesn't matter. It's like that. Javier has I think close to 33, 34 members of parliament, and to get half of it, I think it's 129 or 130. But there are a lot of members of parliament who are from the party of Mauricio Macri, and they are definitely going to cooperate. And I'm sure even some of the parliamentarians who are members of the Peronist party, but respond to the governors, to the provincial governors, I think will eventually vote certain major reforms that Javier will need. In the Senate, Cambiemos has a lot of senators. Javier's party has very few because of this. It's a new party. And the Peronist is well represented. It's going to be, a political, duel and a lot of maneuvering, but it's not impossible to be done. And also, the president in Argentina has a lot of power. So it's not that he's going to be, and with this, I'm not saying, neither advocating that he will become a dictator or anything like that. Unfortunately, you have to, clarify these things or he's going to close the Congress. No, that's not going to happen. He's going to, and he's probably the most committed to the institutions and to the Constitution in Argentina. But the Constitution grants a lot of power to the president. So he has a lot of tools, let's say, at his hands, as well. So it's going to be difficult, but not impossible.
Okay. So back to the Twitter questions. Two from Mateusz Czyżniewski. First, did the anti-libertarian sentiment grew after the election results? So I believe he means, are people scared of what actually happened?
That's a good question. I mean, Argentina, I think the social change in Argentina is happening. And by this, I am not, please, I don't want to create false expectations. I'm not saying that everybody in Argentina has turned into a narco-capitalist or Misesa or anything like that, but particularly in the young segments of the society, thanks to new media, thanks to the work of a lot of think tanks, a lot of YouTubers, a lot of people on TikTok, and the message has reached a lot of people. The vote to Javier, particularly in the young segments, is a very well reasoned and thought out vote. It's not I'm voting him because he has long hair and says weird things. No, and those guys, the young guys, convince their parents. That's how the vote operated, according to my view. There are still a lot of strong statist sentiment in Argentina, and that's also Argentina had not, would have not declined as it had if we didn't have the statist disease. That's also obvious. And a message like the one of Javier makes a lot of people very frightened, because the other issue in Argentina, there are a lot of businessmen who are basically cronies, who live out of all this craziness with the exchange rates of Argentina being one of the closest countries to trade in the world, etc., etc. So there are the people who are statists because of a philosophical position, but there are a lot who live out of this. And he basically has also been very vocal that he wants to eliminate all these privileges. So there will be some sort of backlash, but I think also they are the minority. And right now, clearly, they are the minority.
And the second part of Mateusz's question, and what about the false accusations of right-wing extremism? And especially from the Polish perspective, we've seen the very strong stance Milei took on abortion, on euthanasia. So if you could expand on that.
Well, that's like the question of Mateusz says that the false, accusations. This is, this is also where you stand on the spectrum. This is, let's say, I assume in certain parts of California, if you're not a leftist authoritarian, you're an alt-right or a neo-Nazi. There's basically, those. That's the political spectrum. I am pro-life. I am not pro-abortion. I don't consider, and I hope I am not a far-right extremist or a neo-Nazi or anything like that.
You definitely don't sound like one.
Yeah. And Javier has a pro-life position. In Argentina, the abortion law was voted a few years ago under Macri, one of the biggest mistakes. All the polls, but this was the pro-abortion camp told you, all the polling was, nationwide was against. This was not, this was not a major social issue. Argentina had a lot of way more important problems before, the abortion law was voted. There was not a massive demand, hey, please, we need abortion because we want to kill babies. No. That was just a very brilliant campaign by a very small vocal minority, and it was voted by this in a very strange, voting in the Congress. He's against abortion. I don't think that puts him in the camp of far right extremism or anything like that. He's very much. Javier, I think, in social issues has the best position that you can have, which is allow individuals to do privately what they want, as long as they don't harm, other people, as long as they are not violating contracts, as long as and I think, and please, this is more my personal opinion than Javier's, I don't want, but I think this is a huge step from the current situation we are living, in which many things that should belong to the private sphere have become political and politicized, and I think that's a huge mistake. By the way, the private sphere is more or less an invention and a creation of classical liberalism. You could also add of Christianity. And it's something that should be, sacrosanct, and that we should protect and should be totally a part of what goes in the public sphere. And I think that's the position of Javier, and I think that's very healthy, particularly if you are a member of a minority.
Thank you, Federico. And now I would like to change the shift of our talk, because we have 3 questions about the foreign policy and the foreign relations between Milei, his future government. And the first 2 come from Rafał Mazur from our chat. First, what international establishment, institutions, intelligence will be the biggest problem to Milei? Who is the biggest critic? Who will be the biggest opposition abroad?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I'm sure he's going to have a lot of issues with the Chinese government and everything that is sponsored by China.
He wants to unilaterally cut trade, right?
Yeah. He did what he said. I mean, and this, I don't want to say a bad word, but I wanted to make and I'm not going to say it, but this tells you, I wanted to say how courageous what he's been saying about particularly China. I wanted to use another metaphor, not the most polite, in the sense that you can't rule out how important China. I mean, please. This issue has to do with the Chinese government. China is a magnificent country full of beautiful people. This is not anything to do with China as a country. What he's been saying is the following, that the Argentinian government will limit as much as possible any relationship with the Chinese government, because it's a totalitarian communist party and a government, which, by the way, is the absolute truth. We can deny it, we can cover our eyes, pretend that that Xi Jinping is not the reincarnation of Mao, but that's what it is. But he never said he won't allow trade between, if you're a private company in Argentina, you want to import, export to China or to wherever, it's your right, you can do it. So it's not that he's going to implement any embargo or anything like that, but he's been very courageous that everything he can do as president, he'll do, but he'll allow private organizations. But that's going to create tensions for sure, because it's a very clear stand. There's also the so-called Foro de Sao Paulo, that now is called the Foro de Puebla, which unites people like Lula da Silva, López Obrador in Mexico, Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, who is literally a dictator, by the way, a real dictator and a real killer, imprisoner, etc. And with that, he's going. It's like the incarnation of the international left in Latin America. And with that, he's going to have a strong confrontations, and they're going to try to make his life very miserable. But I also think that he'll gather a lot of support from the Western, more mainstream kinds of organizations, because that's where he stands. He stands for the West, for classical liberalism, for the division of power, for democracy, in the sense that that it's a good way to organize societies and to give as much power to the individual as we can. So definitely there, eventually I think he'll get a lot of support.
And another question from Rafał. Why did Milei decide to visit the US and Israel first? And let me add to this something from myself. He also had apparently a very candid discussion with Volodymyr Zelensky, and he was also very vocal about his support to the Ukraine. So if you could expand on this.
Yeah. I want to start with the Ukraine and and then I'll go to the US and Israel. But his Ukrainian stand, I think, is again one of the most courageous things he's been doing from the very beginning of the war, not now. For two things. And I'll try to explain, and please, I hope this doesn't make you think bad about Argentina. This has nothing to do with Ukraine or anything like that, but two things. Firstly, Argentina is way far from Ukraine, geographically. And Argentina is a very, particularly in the last couple of decades, isolated country. So really, let's say, what's going on between Russia and Ukraine in Argentina is, not very much important. The moment, Putin and Russia decided to invade Ukraine, Javier was one of the very few, very vocal politicians in Argentina who said, this is insane, Putin is a criminal, Ukraine should recover all its territory, and, this is a crime against humanity, and whatever, you can think about. He said it, and from the very beginning. When it was not that popular also, because in certain segments of the society, the problem that there is also is that there is a very established anti-American feeling. And, the US has always been very pro-Ukrainian since the start of the conflict. So he paid probably a cost because of this. With some people, and this is not the whole of the population. I think in Argentina, most of the people by far are in favor of Ukraine. I'm sure of that. But, what did most of politicians? Nothing. They said nothing. The current government is quite pro-Putin in a very ambiguous way, but it is. So, and most politicians said nothing, or, emit some, tweet saying, oh, yeah, please, calling for peace, or things like that, let's hope the conflict ends, not calling it an invasion, sorry, things like that, and, forgetting about it the next second. So now he talked to President Zelensky, and it was a very positive, and recently he posed with the Ukrainian flag, and, his commitment towards Ukraine is unquestionable. Why he decided to visit, and this is my hypothesis, please, I could be completely wrong. I think during his campaign, he has said our international alignment is the United States and Israel. Why? It's a very clearly, let's say, it's a very clear-cut symbolic, probably Israel is the US for Argentina, as you can imagine, is extremely important. Israel, maybe it's not going to be at the center, but is saying, hey, this is where we stand. This is, it's like a very symbolic, and he's been saying this during the campaign. We stand with the West. We stand with a certain way of living. We stand with a certain way of civilization. We stand against aggression. We stand against, autocracy. And I think that is why he has decided to do these trips. If he had decided, because not to question what Rafa said, but I didn't know that he has already announced that this will be the first two trips. But what he has definitely said during the campaign is that the international alignment is the US and Israel.
Thank you, Federico. So one more question about the US that's coming from me. He also had a long phone call that was reported widely by the media with Donald Trump. And Trump apparently is going to visit the inauguration. He's going to attend it. And of course, many media are comparing Javier to Trump. So if you could maybe not necessarily talk whether he is an Argentinian Trump, because it should already be apparent that he's not, but maybe expand on this strange relation that he has, not only with Trump, but with many alt-right members across the world. I myself had a little clash on Twitter with MAP Dominik Tarczyński, who blocked me after I mocked him for cheering on Milei, who would most likely took his chainsaw and cut Mr. Dominik's current place of employment and most of the statistics that he did. So if you could expand on this relation.
Yeah, he's let's say, he also had a very positive and very, very good call with President Biden. So he's not an anti-Trumper, definitely. He's not an anti-Trumper. I assume he values many of the things that Trump did regarding deregulation, and things like that. And he has a certain relationship that you could like more or less. I think in the if you went to the base of all those contacts, they are, I think, at the root of it are particularly the reformists in economics that all these people tried to apply that were more or less successful. Because in the case of Trump, particularly regarding regulation, he's done it. He did a lot in the US because of that. He also did a lot against trade, which is quite sad. But let's say there are certain things, and I think he relates to that. In the case of Bolsonaro, probably the same thing. Bolsonaro had an interesting economics agenda, and in other things, I think it was not the best, probably, but that's for another discussion. But he had also a very positive call with President Macron, President Biden, the European people from the European Union. So there are certain things. I mean, which politician, let's say, has all contacts in his his phone that you could say, oh, I like all of this, but is he going to be a new Trump? No. What I would say is the following, Mikołaj, and you and your team very kindly translated my ideas into Polish regarding this topic. What I would say is the following: is he going to be an ex-Trump? For sure not, and hopefully, if you have to compare him with an international figure, compare him to Balcerowicz or Mart Laar. He's that. He's our great reformer. He's a reformer we've been waiting for. The person who understands that the system is completely rotten and it needs to be absolutely changed. Balcerowicz was not sitting, well, we have to keep 78% of communism and things will more or less accommodate and will be fine. No. So everything was totally rotten. This is a sinking ship, and we have to go for something completely new. And that's hopefully the kind of reformer Javier will be.
Wonderful. And of course, you can find the whole piece translated into Polish on our website, mises.pl. Federico expand on this idea there. And the last question about, for now at least, about the international relations, and I think it's a funny one. Why does Milei want Falklands? People who live there do not want to be part of Argentina. In the referendum, like literally 3 Falklandians were in favor of rejoining Argentina. Milei declared that he will use only diplomatic means to achieve this goal. The question from Jan David Chwyt.
Well, Jan, that's an interesting question. It's not. I understand. Why. I think you could make very good cases for both. Why the Malvinas, not Falklands, are from Argentina.
Sorry,
or no, it's not your fault. Or the Malvinas maybe are a part of the United Kingdom, which is so far from there. But in any case, the most important thing, and really I don't want to, and I won't be the best, I think, let's say, Argentina as a country can make a case of the claim regarding the islands, but this is extremely important. You have to recognize that there are people living there, and you have to, of course, and this is, never, ever to rely on violence to, do whatever you want to do or want to achieve regarding those islands. In Argentina, this is not an easy topic. Just for Jan, and really, this would need probably another live stream, conversation of very long to go into details. But the important thing is that Argentina under Javier most likely will have an adult and very positive relation with the United Kingdom. And this issue, let's say, could be dealt through diplomatic channels, and we'll see what happens in the future. But also it's important that both countries have a positive and adult and friendly relationship.
Thank you, Federico. And now we have a question from our chat, from a person hiding under two hashes. He apparently doesn't know if that was discussed, but his question is, what are the potential increase in prices when changing currency to US dollars like was in European countries with exchanging to euro?
I think that's a very good question. And again, please take everything I'm going to tell you with a grain of salt. There are several issues. The change, from the euro, from local currencies to the euro, I think it affected different economies in different ways. You should take it case by, country by country, case by case, because, there are still a lot of relative differences between countries who have the euro in Europe, and then, say Italy is not as expensive as Germany, and there are a lot of things, but I don't think that will happen. You think, because will Argentina become like very expensive? I don't think so. And the other issue is the following. The big problem that Argentina now faces, and it will face this problem even regardless of dollarization or not, is that what is known as relative prices in Argentina are completely destroyed. And that's a very big issue. In Argentina, let's say, having a Coca-Cola in a cafe could be 10 times more expensive than traveling on probably more, than traveling on a bus for 50 kilometers between the city of La Plata and the city of Buenos Aires. The relative prices are electricity, things like that, because they have been heavily subsidized. A ticket bus in the city costs peanuts, literally. People are so poor, by the way, that many people cannot even afford that. That also tells you the situation of but let's say next year, particularly, Argentina will have to have a lot of inflation, unfortunately. If you allow me, so-called good inflation, because you need to accommodate this, because Argentina now is living in a situation in which everything is about to collapse or has collapsed already, because we know it's like, I'll sell you an iPhone for, $15. You'll never buy it. It won't be there, or it won't be literally like the worst iPhone ever produced, the iPhone 1 totally destroyed. And that is what's going on in Argentina right now. I think that accommodation needs to happen. And after that, going into a scheme of dollarization, I don't think will necessarily imply. And when we see what happened, the cases of Ecuador or El Salvador, that did not happen. It's not that they became, brutally more expensive, that people could not afford goods and services that they could before dollarization. It was exactly the opposite. Many people could afford and could go to, could access goods and services that they couldn't because of inflation and many other things. So I wouldn't be too worried about that.
Now we have a potential life-changing question from Victor Sas Brzabona. How can a foreigner buy property in Argentina?
I think it's very easy. I think Argentina is a very open country. I don't think there are any limitations. The only problem you would face now, hopefully not in the near future, is that there are all these restrictions with capitals that, entering, let's say, legally entering money to Argentina, for instance, to buy property, is almost impossible. That tells you the level of insanity of the country. But let's say there are no like constitutional restrictions, that foreigners cannot, own property or this or that. In Argentina, by the way, it's quite, and this comes from our classical liberal constitution. Argentina is a country still very open to immigration and we are, most of Argentinians are the grandsons and granddaughters of immigrants. Spain and Italy mostly, but also from Poland and other Ukraine and other parts of Europe. So it's not in that regard. Victor, wait a little that, some reforms go into play, and it would be a very good moment to buy, by the way, because now property is very cheap.
So next one from Victor, we've already kind of discussed. It's about why did Milei